Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. May we have a roll call for the City Council, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Najarian. Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here.
And can we have a roll call for the agency, please?
Agency members Friedman.
Here.
Najarian. Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Draymond.
Here.
May we have your report?
The agenda for the March 16, 2010 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, March 11, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. There's two items before you, the first of which is a public hearing. Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding proposed legendary Tower Glendale, 6-story mixed-use residential project located at 300 North Central. 1A is an agency resolution approving and adopting an addendum to mitigated negative declaration. At 1B is council resolution approving and adopting an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration. At 1C is agency motion approving Stage 2 final design review and sign program subject to comments and conditions from the city's principal urban designer and the agency. At D is agency motion approving a sign variance based on the findings and conditions. At E is an agency motion approving a 7-space parking exception based on findings and conditions. At F is council motion approving and accepting parking plan subject to comments and conditions of the council. At G is council motion approving urban art program subject to comments and conditions of the council. At H is council motion approving instrument imposing covenants on real property.
Mr. Starbird.
Yes, I'll go to Phil Lanzafame, Assistant Executive Director. Phil.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, members of the Redevelopment Agency and the City Council, another housing project for you. This is a market rate project at the northeast corner of Central and California. You have seen this project before, both this project as well as prior iterations. This is the final design review, and then there is a whole series of approvals, many of which are the result of our downtown specific plan, taking advantage of incentives through providing open space. I would like to introduce Senior Redevelopment Project Manager Mark Berry to introduce the project and the development team, then they'll walk you through the final design.
Okay, I'll also open the public hearing.
Mayor Quintero, Chairman Draymond, members of the council and agency. The legendary tower project, as Phil mentioned, is on the northeast corner of California and Central. The project was first presented to the agency on October 13th for Stage 1 design approval. The project essentially remains the same, with a modern style of architecture and a U-shaped podium design with upper-level residential units with 2-story ground-level live-work units. The project has made some changes from the Stage 1 design. The project now, the unit mix has changed slightly. It's now 72 condominium units and 8 live work. Previously, it was 71 and 9. But more importantly, the applicant has made a series of changes to address comments received from the agency on the Stage 1 design. The applicant has reprogrammed the courtyard space by moving the pool indoors and moving the community room to the north end of the courtyard. This allows the courtyard to be programmed with a fireplace and a barbecue area. Previously, it was where the swimming pool was at. For the Stage 2 application, the developer was asked to clarify the design of the covered open space on the corner of California and Central. In response, the applicant has converted the adjacent live-work unit located at the north of that space to a cafe to increase activity in this area. And the applicant is also proposing to put the public art program in this area. For the Stage 2, the applicant was also asked to identify the project's sustainable features. An outline of these features is attached to the staff report as Exhibit 4. The urban designer has reviewed the Stage 2 submittal and supports the project, but is concerned about the corner public area. The concern is this area will be perceived as being private because it's roofed and also has a series of glass panels that partially enclose that area. The urban designer is recommending approval, but with the condition that the glass panels be removed. The Stage 2 submittal includes an art program as required by the DSP. The applicant retained Michael Hayden to develop a light and sound sculpture that uses a series of programmable LED light tubes that will be affixed to the ceiling of the patio space on California Central. The Art Commission reviewed the proposed art program and recommends approval, but they did express concerns about the perceived openness or publicness of the program given the location in that patio area. The Stage 2 packet also includes a sign program for the commercial space. The program includes projecting signs that are not code compliant because they exceed the 6 square foot area set by code. A variance is being requested to allow projecting signs with area up to 12.5 square feet. As staff has analyzed the request and has prepared findings in support of the variance. The applicant is proposing to use density bonuses provided by the DSP. The project site is within the allowable DSP standards, but the FAR of 3.5 exceeds the 3.0 limit for the Orange Central District. The project is using the public space incentive by providing about 3,500 square feet of open space, which is split between additional setback areas along the 2 major frontages and that corner area on Central and California. This is about more than double the minimum required public open space. And per the DSP, the applicant is requesting approval of covenants to implement the incentive. In addition to the sign variance, the applicant is requesting a parking exception. The project provides 165 spaces, and originally this met the code requirement. However, changing the live-work unit to cafe increased the parking demand by 7, and that's the source of the 7-space shortfall. Staff does believe that the shortage would be offset by the cafe having a large amount of walk-in traffic and also the availability of on-street parking in that general vicinity, and also the availability of the Orange Street parking structure about a block away. A motion is attached with the appropriate findings for the agency's consideration. The project is proposing to use tandem parking, actually 29 sets of tandem sets. This is permitted with an improved parking plan. The parking plan is attached as Exhibit 7, and just briefly, what it does is it would assign a tandem set to individual live, work, or residential units. The ground level of the project would be reserved for the live, work, and cafe, and the underground levels of the structure would be for residents and guests. And staff does believe that the tandem layout and operation can operate efficiently without impacting city streets. Finally, an addendum was prepared for the project that updates a mitigated native declaration that was prepared for a project that was previously approved for the site in 2005. The addendum analyzed and compared the impacts of this proposed project with the project from 2005 and concluded that the project impacts were no greater than those of the 2005 project and subjects the project to the same mitigation measures to address potential air quality impacts from construction and potential hazard materials that could be on the site from previous uses like the gas station. So in conclusion, staff is recommending the agency approve the Stage 2 design subject to the urban designer's condition, and staff is also recommending the agency approve the addendum, parking exception, and sign variance, and the council approve the covenants, parking plan, and art program. With that, that concludes my comments. I'm going to turn this over to Mark McGahey, or Surgeon Stoney, project applicant.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back in front of you.
We'd want your name for the record, please.
Surge Sony, S-U-R-J-I-T. Last name is S-O-N-I. I'm a general member of, managing member of Legendary Towers Hollywood, and I have to commend the agency and council for a very effective and efficient working staff. Their cooperation and coordinated efforts have allowed us to move very quickly through to what we think is very, very close to our final design. There will always be minor iteration changes as we go through to construction drawings, as we expect. We were most pleased to have had the opportunity to present our art program to the Art Commission, and we were especially pleased that they both understood it, appreciated it, and encouraged that it be placed in a manner that was going to be clearly visible and available to the public to access. I'd like to focus on a couple of things. I've got a few illustrations there in your materials as well. There's a night view looking to the northeast. The area, thank you. The public use area is within this corner and runs also along both faces of Central and California. This space is open. There are glass panels, and between the glass panels there are openings of approximately 8 feet between them as you come along California as well as you go along Central. In light of the comments from planning, we intend to enlarge those openings and narrow the glass panels some more to create even a more open sense to that space. Within that space, I'd like to bring some of the boards here. Because of the nature of the space, it's difficult to understand and appreciate how it functions. But it is open from both sides, and these illustrations and renderings show that the public can actually move through the spaces, and I even encourage to do so. We've worked with planning with the suggestion that perhaps what we can do is work with the paving material at the sidewalks to create a sense of continuity. So that the interior space, or what would be perceived as under roof space, is recognized as being available for the public, and that they are encouraged to come into that space. There are additional renderings of this type. We've also played with notions of what kind of treatments we can play with to create that whimsical and interesting attention-drawing invitation to the public to come in and use this space. There will be furnishings located within that space. This is the public space area. North of it is intended to be a cafe. There will be opportunity for people to use the facilities of the cafe. Some of the space has doors and will open. The light and sound art is housed within that space between 11 feet and 20 feet, so it's out of reach of prying hands, but it's clearly visible and clearly effective in its use. Here's another illustration of a possible flooring design that could create a sense of continuity between the sidewalk into the public space. We're continuing to play with other options as well. And our landscape architect even came up with something quite whimsical. With this, we think we can create a sense that the public is both invited and welcome and encouraged to use this space. The nature of the art itself is that these 66 light sticks are programmable, and they will listen to and react to the environment. The experience from the public will never be the same a second time around, because it is programmable so that it doesn't have to repeat any of the programs. The visual experience of the art, the board on the art. No, I'm sorry. The visual experience with respect to the art is affected by your perspective. If you're sitting in this location, it may appear to be a set of arrays running in this direction. In this, it may appear more random. But with the movement of the lights and the sound, it creates a nice ambiance and a nice place to go and to sit and to enjoy the space. The building is 105,000 square feet. It's 80 units. 9 of them are live-work. The live-work spaces border the Central and the California side, and the project is designed to encourage repeated trips to local merchants and to create an active flow. The project itself has 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Again, we can only say good things about staff and the efforts to help us and guide us through this process, we ask for your approval. I'm happy to answer any questions if you like. Mr. Valier, the architect, is
Let
here
me
as well.
start by welcoming you, and we're all very, very happy to have you here. I'm a big fan of the project, but I'll speak later. We'll open it up. Ms. Friedman.
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting project. I'm glad to see it, coming to its final approval. I'm very much in favor of it. Just a few comments. Whether it's an 8-foot gap between those panels or a 12-foot gap or a 10-foot gap, to me is less important than it being proportional and it being functional in the way that you intend, and that the art's protected from the elements and all of that. So I'm not as concerned. I feel less concerned after seeing the perspectives that show what it's going to look like and how open it's going to feel. The flooring, all of those patterns are intriguing. My suggestion would be to work with your artist who's done the installation to be sure that whatever it is doesn't compete against it and works in harmony with the artist he's envisioned it. So that would be my suggestion. And I have a question that's maybe more for staff. Because it's public open space, even though it's sort of within the envelope of the building, I'm wondering how that works in terms of the interaction with the cafe, whether there's a separation between the cafe space, the open space. What happens if somebody decides to go in and take a nap on a bench inside? Is it like a park where they can do that? Does the cafe have authority to throw people out? Do you have to make a purchase? I'm just wondering how all of that sort of plays out logistically.
I'm going to talk about the policy structure behind the downtown specific plans policy, and Alan Loomis can speak to the specifics of this project. Originally, when we added this open space as an incentive, it was never envisioned that it would always be open to the public at all times, but accessible to the public, but could be continued to be used as part of the economic activities of the property. So we wanted to make it link without making it a necessarily public space as such, without control. If you'd like more detailed explanation on this, Alan Loomis can talk to the.
No, I think that gives me a good idea of the way it was intended and how it would play out. And I think that's very appropriate because you'll have people living inside, so it has to be a safe and comfortable place for them as well. And I do think that the concept of using this flooring pattern that continues onto the public sidewalk as a way of guiding people in and connecting the public and the to the semi-public, to the private spaces, will work very well. So I like the direction you're going in. I would be fine with sort of allowing you, along with Public Works, to decide on your own floor pattern. I don't really feel the need, with such a well-designed building, for it to come back in front of me again. My only thing I do ask is that you do work with the artist to be sure that it works in harmony with the installation.
In fact, that's exactly what we did do. Our landscape architect communicated directly with the artist. They talked about how the art works, and they tried to come up with patterns that we're still exploring. We will ultimately dial into the one that is most complementary to and works well with and enhances the experience rather than detracts from it.
Okay.
That's certainly something that's very important. Mr. Vaughey.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Vagay. I'm the architect for the project. I just wanted to say that it's very important for us as the architect to keep the glass panels, because the idea behind these glass panels was that we wanted to create a public space which is an outdoor room and not just a civic plaza. Also, at night, we wanted to make it into a light box. So there would be a light between the glass panels, and it would glow, and then it would frame the artwork, which is sound and light, inside of it. So taking away the glass panels, it just opens it up to the street and the elements and the noise, and it takes away the idea of the outdoor room. So it's very important for us to keep that element.
Okay.
I know the urban designer and I didn't agree on this issue, but that's just my feeling.
Well, I can only speak for myself, and as much
also,
as
if I may add, the total open space required, just from a theoretical point of view, is 2747, which is 10% of the site. Out of that 2747, 2,213 square feet of it is actually open to air. It's not within this space. Only 1,328 square feet of it is within this space. So majority of the open space that we've provided in the project, if you look at that page that has all the charts in it, is actually outside of this space. So we are way beyond. Our total open space provided is 3,500 square feet, which is about 800 square feet over what's required.
So those 8-foot openings, how many are there, and are those permanently open? Do they open and close?
They're,
or how
they're
does that work?
permanently open. On the California side, there's 4 of those, so there's 32 feet of opening out of the 50-foot length. So majority of the length is actually open. On the central side, there's 2 of those, so there will be 16 feet of opening. Now, they're permanently open. Well, they're permanently open, but the hours will be limited. We don't want people after midnight or 1 a.m. to come inside there and sleep over at night, just like any other park, basically.
So how do you block that off at night?
We haven't designed that yet, but we're thinking of potentially roll-down doors, roll-down gates that will hide in the ceiling, and they'll open, let's say at 1 a.m., they just come down, but you could still see through them, you could see the artwork, but you can't actually access it.
During hours of availability as well as after hours, our intention is always that you'll be able to look through. It will appear an open space, so if we end up having to resort to protective elements such as a roll-down gate system, it will be an open link, big link gate system so that there is still a clear understanding that this is available for public space, the art's still there, and it's protected. One of the things we worry about, of course, is 2 o'clock in the morning and having too many bottles of beer. Wouldn't it be neat to throw a few of those bottles up at the art? We have to protect it in some fashion. So we are still exploring what is the least intrusive manner of creating that level of protection while maintaining access. But our intention is access. One of the reasons Mr. Valli and, frankly, the entire development team felt so strongly about the glass panels was because they work together with the art, and they work together with the massing of the building to create a sense that this very large structure after hours is literally floating off the ground.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Loomis. And my question is, after hearing the explanation and seeing the additional renderings that they brought in, do you feel more comfortable about the functionality of that space as a publicly accessible open space, or do you still feel that they should make those openings larger?
Well, to be honest, the renderings directly behind me, this is the first time I've seen them. We've had many conversations with the development team about their vision of this space, and I think we have a professional difference of opinion. My recommendation regarding the panels is also partially based on the reaction that came from the Arts Commission, which was equally concerned that the space would not be public. The simplest way to address that is simply to have no glass panels enclosing the space. Other alternatives would involve, with the roll-down doors or other mechanisms, require a little bit more investigation and leave it's a little bit open-ended at the moment, how public that would actually be perceived. I have no doubt that actually as a kind of glass box, you're going to look in and see a space that looks visible and to the public, and there are openings and people can go in and use it. So I don't doubt that it's actually going to be used by the public, particularly with the cafe there. The question is, to a certain extent, the intent of how open to the public that is, and the more a public space gets enclosed with glass panels or doors, the less it feels like public open space and more like a lobby. So that's kind of the essential difference that we highlighted. But as I said, I believe we do have just simply a professional difference of opinion. And I think the downtown specific plan can be interpreted in either direction, although to a large extent the downtown specific plan anticipated public spaces like plazas or parks, more traditional public spaces, and not these kind of hybrid public spaces that are partially enclosed by buildings and are partially public.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question entirely.
It does. Okay, thank you. So I'll wrap up. It is a sort of a different conception of a public space for Glendale. I'm fine. You can probably have a seat. Thanks. But having lived in places like New York, where even interiors of buildings can be used as public space, I think, it's very nicely done, and I'm certainly willing to go with this vision and see how it works, and maybe it'll be a model, hopefully a positive model for future, public's uses, and I'm assuming that if somehow it doesn't work out and the public's not coming in, hopefully you'll be open to modifying the building for that original intent. I think it would benefit your building and benefit your cafe, certainly, if the public knew they were invited in. And whatever the roll-down door is, I'm assuming we're not thinking about, a white vinyl garage door. That was the first vision I had when you mentioned it. But, if you can find some kind of material that's transparent and gauzy and light-looking, it could be really nice. So I do hope that you stay open to Mr. Loomis's, his suggestions as you move, forward, and that if you do think of any ways that you can still have your floating glass room and make it more open, that you would, remain open to that and maybe incorporate, any changes as you go along. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Weaver,
Didn't even have my hand up.
you're next.
Can you explain the roof concept, what's happening there? Trying to understand why you tucked the little garden up there unless you needed that for open space or...
We didn't need it for
Paving.
open space. That's an area of exploration. We know that space exists. We know that it can possibly be put to decent use. We thought it might be a comfortable and a nice place for residents to go up there and enjoy the sun and the views. We have wonderful weather here. Why shouldn't they enjoy it? Unfortunately, as we've noted before during our stage one, our courtyard is between two relatively tall structures. Consequently, what else can we provide as amenities to our residents? It's not essential. If in further exploration it turns out that we can enlarge it, we will. If it makes sense to eliminate it in favor of solar panels that can help reduce the HOA expenses, we'll consider those. So we're pretty open with respect to that. It's not an essential component of the design. It is one that we're exploring.
But
We think it can benefit the residents.
The rest of the roof is on slope. Is that by design?
No, the rest of the roof, it's a flat roof system.
Well, it says slope.
It's got to have cricketing and,
Oh, very gentle slope.
yeah. It's a slight slope, as typical for a flat roof system.
Because I was looking for solar panels up there, because you have so much space. And
We've installed solar panels in virtually every one of our projects, including projects that we've taken over that were in the midst of construction. Wherever the opportunity presents itself for us to include them, we do. There is a considerable amount of HVAC equipment that has to find its way up there.
Oh, yeah.
With a project of this size. So until we get our mechanical engineers on board and they dictate to us where they need to have their materials, we can't fully program that roof yet.
And the indoor pool, is that glass walls surrounding it?
Yes,
Okay, so you'll be looking straight through all the open area in there.
that's correct.
And you put it indoor because you're not going to get the direct sunlight. So you gotta
Precisely.
keep it heated.
Yes, and by putting it inside, we'll actually have an increased value and benefit to the residents. They can use it year-round. Even during the wintertime, it'll be heated. It's a little more protective environment. It doesn't benefit from outdoor sun anyway, so let's take it in.
They can go outside and barbecue.
Exactly.
Or in the middle, or go into the lounge, the exercise room.
Exactly.
Okay. That's the only questions I had from you. I just have one other comment. Well, you can sit down again.
Thank you.
Understand, folks, this is just me, nobody else. I don't care for the public open space. I never have considered that so important. This area looks to be about 5,000 square feet between the cafe and the open space. For decades, we had Bob's Big Boys all over town. Now we have none. It was all a restaurant. 5,000 square feet might fit a big boy, because the one used to be down here on Broadway and Maryland. Now we don't have any in Glendale. I've driven this street thousands of times over the years, and it's dead at night. South of it, you have Sears Tower, no windows, totally closed in and dark. To the north, there's nothing. To the east, you got to go 2 blocks to get to the pedestrian activity on Brand. To the west, there's none. So, in my little mind, thinking that people are going to come down to this place to sit in the public open space to look at some art, to me, it's a far reach. I'd rather see a restaurant, a known restaurant in here, that would draw people, which of course means more parking spaces. So I don't know how you'd handle that. But it's going to go the other way. You're going to have the open space. I'll be interested to see how many people actually come down there. And I will say that looking at your one-bedroom apartments, I like them a heck of a lot better than the apartments on the Circuit City site. They're double. They look much more livable as space. So if you ever compare the other, you'll see what I mean. Thank you.
Mr. Draymond.
I will try not to repeat comments made by others.
I'm going to try.
I'm going to try. Anyway, well, seems to be a lot of discussion about glass. Thumbs up and thumbs down on glass. Mr. Hagani, can you come forward for a moment?
Yes, sir.
The concept of open space, this kind of open or accessible space, let's call it that,
right.
Public accessible space, within the boundaries of the area. Was it your idea that the concept, your belief that the philosophy was that people are going to be sitting at home at, let's say, Adams Hill and say, you know what, let's pack up the kids and go down to the corner of California and Central and sit in that glassed-in box down there? Or was the concept that by over time, that as projects begin to be built that include these elements, that people eventually walking or moving through that area come to understand the concept that all of these buildings will have some publicly accessible space, so that if you are walking or are shopping or are strolling, you know that there is a space there. You can sit, relax, take a load off your feet, reflect, etc.
It was the latter, to add to the sense of
Good
exploration. Yes, right.
Good answer. Thank you. Sure. Take a box seat. Thank you. Yeah, that's the thing as far as I recall as well. So and it's for that reason that I don't object to the glass. I think that the overall idea is that people are going to understand this, and I think our residents are quite capable of adapting to the concept that, glass or no glass, they can walk in there and relax and contemplate and think and reflect and all of those. Can look at the art. And I also, and maybe it's just me, but your architect is there. When I looked at these, I thought, it's sort of a theme that's carried on throughout the whole ground floor. As you look into the space, there's I should call it a bar area, is that what you call it? And all of that is also heavy use of glass in this design, these renderings, and even down to the light fixtures. So to me, it was a theme that began on the outside and is carried all the way through. It has beautiful, beautiful, clean lines, and it's just very, very attractive, modern look to it, which I just think is it's a great, to me, it's a great design. It's a great building. So I don't have any objections to it. I also, though, if there is somebody from our staff that can address the 7 parking spaces, I understand how that came to be, but I'm talking about what the rationale is for the recommendation. And just go ahead.
Mr.
You were
Chairman,
talking.
while Mark's coming up to the podium while he's here, the spaces came about because we took out one.
No, I understand the reason. I'm
Placed it.
talking about the rationale for for approving it. I mean, in other words, the comment that was made is that I guess the cafe is primarily going to service people who are in-house anyway, so is that what?
Could be walk-in, the proximity of parking both on-street in the area, as well as the Orange Street garage. And then also, if you were able to share the parking, if you will, some of that commercial that might be on a lower level, people will start to know that that's available for that type of use.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. So,
Isn't he a brilliant project manager?
is there a thought to, and it's not that I think this is going to happen or hope that it does, but outside of Glendale, it is not uncommon to find a building that has an in-house cafe where the in-house cafe goes out, and then you have a space that used to be a cafe. What is our sort of plan B? Is there someone from Legacy that can?
Businesses come, businesses go. That's the reality of life, especially in these economic times. We were anxious to create an environment for live-work spaces and small businesses that would thrive. This particular building has 80 units. In all, between the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, we expect they're going to be children. We expect they're going to be seniors. We expect they're going to be downsizers, young couples, shared roommates. We think that these people are going to want to come back at the end of the day, and having the proximity of a cafe where they can reach down, maybe go get an ice cream soda, maybe pick up a lunch. Perhaps the seniors can sit down in the midday and share a discussion over the newspaper and a light lunch. We think it will work. Our original notions, and I agree with you, Mr. Weaver, it would have been wonderful if we could have allocated that space into a full sit-down destination restaurant. That would be glorious. We just don't have the parking for it. It's not possible. It's also inherently dangerous at this time and this stage because of the level of development or lack thereof along Central. Down the line, we think it would probably be more viable than now. I suspect if any particular tenant, restaurateur, cafe owner fails, it will probably be replaced by somebody else relatively quickly. We are hoping that we will have the good luck of attracting somebody like a Earth Cafe would be ideal. That would be fabulous. They bring their own following with them. They're in high demand everywhere they go. They're natural. They have the right profile of consumer. What we're not looking for is another tiny, greasy deli. We're not going to let that happen. That's not what this building is about. That's not what this community is about. We're looking for good quality tenants, and particularly the businesses. We only have 9 live-work units. So we get to choose, and we get to be selective, and that'll help us, I think. And we're looking for synergistic businesses that can work together, that will draw people repeatedly to this area, and will create a community.
Well, thank you. I hope that you do find someone like an Earth Cafe, but all I'm pointing out is I've seen so many buildings, city after city after city, where this is the vision, but it ends up being a dead space, simply because it is an island and it is somewhat limited in its draw. But in any case, that isn't enough to make me move away from my feelings about the project and the design. So anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'm content with it.
Okay, well, we'll start just talking about architecture in general. For me, I'm a big fan of Gaudi, the modernist Calatrava, and Mr. Lewis in descending order. That's how I rank the famous Catalan, the other guys from Valencia, and building stuff, modern stuff all over the world. And so I always listen to Mr. Lewis and his comments, and I think some of them are well taken in terms of the columns, but whether they're narrowed or kept, the the same as they are now, I mean, to me, it's somewhat marginal, I think. So overall, I mean, I am just very, very impressed. And quite frankly, when I first heard that the name of the tower was legendary, I thought, boy, that's a bit presumptuous, but it really isn't. What you're going to do on that corner, I tell you, we should be thanking you for years to come. You are really going to do something special in a very difficult corner. A corner that, as we know, a number of developers tried to make a go and just were unable to do it.
Don't scare them away.
But in all of the renderings and all of the concepts that they came up with, none were as good as this, quite frankly. So I'm glad it's fallen in your lap, because I think you have the right idea, and especially with the live-work units. I think you're going to hit a home run with that concept. In terms of this whole LED, I had the good fortune of touring Korea. I was there for about 10 days and went to numerous LED factories and companies that work in those products, and it's just unbelievable what you can do. So I am really looking forward to this concept. It will be the first time that this sort of thing is used in Glendale, and to my knowledge, I don't think there's anything similar in Burbank or Pasadena or anywhere else. So we're going to really showcase this technology and all of the possibilities. So I'm very, very excited about that. In terms of the top of the building, if possible, I would recommend doing some sort of activity for the homeowners there, because they're just beautiful views of the Verdugos, of Griffith Park, the Sears Tower. Well, not really. I think it's a little bit higher. You might even have views all the way to downtown L.A. But just the Verdugos and Griffith Park, that I think that's going to add value to the project. And if you can put solar panels in, obviously it's to your benefit as well as the homeowners, and I think it's going to be a great sales tool. I did have a question. The live-work units, are the second floors sort of a full second floor, or is it more of a loft?
They do not extend all the way through at this stage. They do.
We actually used to have them as lofts, where the second floor would open to the ground floor, but there's a code issue.
Okay.
Since we have a podium building, the concrete has to go all the way to the edge of the building. So now they're separated completely. It's a full second floor. There's a spiral stair that connects the two.
That's great. That's good. Yeah, I was just
So they could
curious.
be used separately. You could use the elevator system in the building to access your unit from the courtyard, as well as from your work unit.
Excellent.
So you have separate entries.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I actually have a couple of people in mind that I'm going to mention this concept to them. I think they would benefit by that location.
Looking for my pen so I can take down the freestyle.
I'll give you that. So anyway, like I say, I'm very appreciative. I think you've done a wonderful job. I'm happy the staff worked with you, and looking forward to the ribbon cutting.
Thank you.
Mr. Draymond.
One quick last thing, and it's just as by way of a thank you, and that is for, I noticed as I've listened to my colleagues, Sean, Mr. Weaver, and Mr. Friedman, and Mr. Quintero, so many of the issues that were mentioned during the Phase 1 that you did obviously take notes and obviously did modify, incorporate, and so on, and I want you to know that I appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with the City Council motions. There's one at
Mr. Mayor,
1B.
housekeeping. Can we do all the council motions on one?
Yes, you may. There's a council resolution at 1B, and then there are 3 council motions at 1F, G, and H. That
Do them
they
all
can be
at one
taken
time?
together. Yes, they may.
That's my motion.
Okay, and I'll start by closing the public hearing, and I'll take your motion, Mr. Weaver.
Second.
Roll call.
For the council, council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian, Weaver,
Aye.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
And do we have a motion for the
Yes.
agency?
For 1A, C, D, and E.
We have a second.
Second.
Mr. Kasakian, if you would, please.
Agency members Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian, Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chairman Draymond.
Yes.
Okay, I think we are done.
There's actually, no, one more. Done for that item.
Oh, yeah,
There's another
no,
public
I know we have another item.
Next item on the
Give a
agenda.
few minutes to clear there.
Certainly.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Especially local owners.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, maybe while the next group is getting settled in, a quick announcement. This will be the last meeting of the afternoon meetings and council evening meetings in this chambers beginning next week. As you know, we will be relocating to room 105 of the Municipal Services Building. That's the building on the stilts over here on the corner. Pardon me? 633 East Broadway. Evening council meetings and afternoon meetings will be held there through May while we do the interior improvements in this room.
So then the rumor that we're meeting at the Burbank Council Chambers and that they're moving to Pasadena is just an idle rumor?
It has a lot of interest, but I think it's an idle rumor. I'm not sure we'd want to deal with their issues. We'll keep our own.
But think of the fun.
Oh, no.
I'm still with that thunder.
All right, let's read the item into the record.
Number 2 is a public hearing, Director of Community Planning and Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding proposed advertising signage overlay zone for the Americana brand and the Glendale Galleria. At 2A is council resolution certifying a mitigated negative declaration. At 2B is an ordinance for introduction adding Chapter 30.26 Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code relating to creating an advertising signage overlay zones and amending certain provisions of Chapter 30.33 related signs. At C is an ordinance for introduction amending the zoning map.
Mr. Starbird.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency, let me go to our favorite planner, Director of Community Planning, Hassan Haghani. Hassan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Starbird. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and members of the agency. You might remember that at the time that we wrote the downtown specific plan, one of the important principles behind it was to maintain the city's downtown's economic competitiveness in the region over several decades, and that's how we wrote a lot of the policies. The item that's in front of you today is a new paradigm that's somewhat a significant step away or a new step in the way that we have devised policies so far. Therefore, members of the legal staff, community redevelopment and housing staff, and community planning department staff have worked very closely to devise a proposed set of policies that have many different moving parts, and in a minute, Roger Kiesel, the senior planner who has written the staff report and much of the ordinances with the help of legal staff, is going to go over some of the highlights of the staff report, especially for the members of the community who are watching this item from home. Many of the items that Roger will highlight will reflect some of the safety mechanisms that we are proposing to make sure that while this is a step in a new direction, we are still maintaining some of the important principles that guide the rest of our zoning and land use regulations. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Roger to highlight the staff report, and in the end, if you'd like to introduce the ordinance, there are a couple of minor additional words that I would like to add, which I will share with you at the end. Thank you very much. Roger, please.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, and is there anyone that wants to speak on this item? Please turn in your speaker cards. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Before you this afternoon is a resolution certifying a mitigated negative declaration and the introduction of two ordinances relating to the establishment of a new overlay zone, the ASOZ, and the placing of this zone in a particular area of the city's zoning map. You may recall on November 10th of last year, staff presented to you a sort of a policy discussion on the proposed zone change application that the city had recently jointly received from the Glendale Galleria and the Americana brand. The zone change requested creation of an advertising or of an overlay zone, allowing the installation of wall signs that would not meet the standards for typical wall signs and allow non-accessory signs within certain areas of the city. The purpose of that meeting on the November 10th was to seek direction from you all regarding the zone change application requesting the ASOZ. At this meeting, council agency members expressed general support for the request. However, there were concerns raised regarding the locations of certain signs. Two signs were initially proposed at the intersection of Broadway and Brand in the old the Mervyn's building. These signs have now been eliminated from this request. The council agency also expressed concerns regarding proposed signs fronting the driveway leading to the Americana Brand parking garage, which that sign faces Brand Boulevard, and then two signs located on either side of the bridge that crosses Central Avenue. A sunset clause, potential criteria to locate an ASOZ, and potential regulations for signs allowed in an ASOZ were also discussed at that meeting. And at the conclusion, staff adopted a motion to direct staff to develop an overlay zone reflecting their comments. Since that time, and as a result of that input, as well as input from the Planning Commission, which held a public hearing on the zone change a couple weeks ago on March 3rd, staff has drafted a text amendment to create new zoning regulations for an ASOZ zone to be added to the zoning ordinance, and has prepared a proposed amendment to the zoning map to place an ASOZ zone within the boundaries of the Galleria and the Town Center districts of the DSP. This presentation pretty much follows the format of the staff report. The staff report outlines the text and map amendments necessary for the proposed zone change and includes three components. The first component is the text amendment. The text amendment creates the new overlay zone regulations for an advertising signage overlay zone, the ASOZ, by adding a new chapter 30.26, to the code. The second component of the project is a map amendment, which amends the zoning map and places the ASOZ within the boundaries of the Gallery and the Town Center districts of the Downtown Specific Plan. And those two districts encompass the majority of the Glendale Galleria and all of the Americana brand. And then the third component, which is also a text amendment but incorporated into the first text amendment, is amending Chapter 30.33, which are the sign regulations, to make the sign regulations, that chapter, consistent with the proposed overlay zone text amendment that you're hearing today. So let me first summarize the advertising signage overlay zone text amendment. The proposed text amendment creates new zone regulations for an ASOZ. to be added to Chapter 30.26 of the city's zoning code, and sets forth a description and purpose of the ASOZ, the application requirements for an ASOZ, and the procedures to install wall signs allowed by an ASOZ. One of the sections of the text amendment is a definition section, and the definition section defines terms for various items unique to the proposed ASOZ. One of the definitions is for what is called an ASOZ accessory sign. As you may recall, during your policy discussion in November, the council agency expressed some interest in allowing some cross-advertising to occur between the Galleria and the Americana. Under the city's current sign regulations, cross-advertising between the Americana and the Galleria would not be permitted, as signs containing cross-advertising are non-accessory signs, and non-accessory signs are currently prohibited in the city's code. To address the potential council agency interest, an ASOZ accessory sign is defined in the proposed text amendment as a sign allowed by an ASOZ which carries advertisements incidental and related only to the primary use of the premises or within the ASOZ, including signs or sign devices indicating the business transacted at, services rendered, goods sold or produced on the premises or within the ASOZ by either the owner, occupant, or developer of the premises. And this definition is basically the definition contained in the zoning code for an accessory sign with the inserted language allowed by the ASOZ or within the ASOZ. And this proposed definition would allow cross-advertising to occur within specific ASOZs. The definition section also includes a definition for viewed primarily from a pedestrian street. This phrase means that the sign may be seen with greater ease from a public street that is a primary pedestrian street than from streets that are not so designated. This definition is important to ensure that signs will contribute to and are compatible with the predominantly pedestrian-oriented scale and function of the pedestrian-oriented street and area. The proposed text amendment also includes criteria to locate an ASOZ. These criteria are listed in your staff report on pages 7 and 8 and include items such as areas proposed for an ASOZ must be designated DSP in the general plan. They must be located within the boundaries of the Central Glendale Redevelopment Project area. They must be a minimum of 20 acres in size and devoted to intense commercial activity, I should say. These criteria were chosen to promote additional economic development and private investment in the core of downtown Glendale and to prevent reintroduction of blighting due to the loss of retail businesses during economic downturns. The criteria were also drafted to eliminate potential visual blighting influences from overcrowding of large wall signs and to control where the overlay zone may be placed so that it focuses on intense retail districts, eliminating potential impacts on lower intensity residential areas. The criteria for locating an ASOZ would permit the placement of this overlay zone within the Galleria and the town center districts of the DSP. The proposed text amendment also provides regulations for signs allowed in the ASOZ. These regulations are contained on page 9 of your staff report. With the exception of one sign, all the signs proposed at the Galleria and the Americana brand to be part of the ASOZ would comply with these regulations. The Americana brand does propose a sign located on the building facade fronting the driveway facing Brand Boulevard, which does not comply with these regulations. This sign would be viewed primarily from Brand Boulevard, which is adjacent which adjacent to the Americana brand is defined as a primary pedestrian street in the DSP. In addition, the sign proposed would cover the elevator tower windows and some architectural details. Because the proposed sign does not comply with the criteria proposed for the ASOZ, staff does not recommend approval of this particular sign, although the location of the sign may be appropriate if the sign was better integrated or incorporated as an architectural element into the elevator tower in such a way that it contributes to the pedestrian character of Brand Boulevard and that area in general. As previously mentioned, the council agency members discussed the merits of a sunset clause, which would eliminate the ASOZ after a certain period of time, subject to further extension by the City Council. In your November 10th, 2009 motion, you directed staff to include provisions for a sunset date for the overlay zone between 18 and 24 months. A majority of the Planning Commission members expressed favor for a sunset clause of between 2 and 3 years and recommended its inclusion in the ASOZ ordinance. At the Planning Commission hearing, a member of Crusoe affiliated representative there stated that they were not in favor of a sunset clause, but stated if one were instituted, that a minimum 4 to 5 years would be needed to amortize their investments of installing the signs and the framing and the lighting. In the text amendment, there is appropriate language drafted into it to authorize the imposition of a sunset clause if council so desires. In response to council comments, staff has also investigated the possibility of requiring project applicants to enter into agreements with the city or the redevelopment agency, providing additional public benefits. A development agreement, for example, would provide additional certainty to project applicants that ASOC's standards would not be changed during the term of the development agreement, and could require sign applicants to share in sign revenue with the city. Staff recommends that the council consider requiring agreements with the city or redevelopment agency to provide these public benefits. The second component of, so that was the text amendment. The second component of the project is the map amendment to place the newly created ASOZ in the Galleria and Town Center districts of the DSP. You have an ordinance in front of you. Exhibit A of the proposed text amendment delineates where the ASOZ would be placed if the text amendment and the map amendment were approved. Exhibit B of the proposed map amendment shows locations and sizes of the signs proposed as part of the map amendment and would be made part of the ordinance. And right before I came up and spoke, I gave you all a 11 by 17 sheet of the signs proposed at the Galleria. One of the concerns raised by the Planning Commission was that the original material provided from the Galleria didn't accurately show and wasn't easily discerned where the signs were and their proportion and location on the proposed buildings. So as a result of the Planning Commission comments, the applicant has provided that and given that to you. Actually, at this time, I can just breeze through where the signs will be located. These are the Galleria sign locations. Okay. Okay. What is that? Oh, sorry. Okay. These are the Galleria sign locations. This is also in your packet, and it's probably clear. There are 5 signs proposed at the entrance to the Galleria, which faces one of the underground, or the driveways leading to the underground parking of the Americana. There are 5 signs proposed there. There are 2 signs proposed on the bridge over Central Avenue. There is 1 sign proposed on the parking garage. Where? Oh, sorry. Just move it. Oops. Now I did it. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So let me start over again. 5 signs proposed here in this area. There are 2 signs proposed here on either side of the bridge. There's 1 sign proposed on the parking garage facing the Macy's parking lot. There's also a sign proposed near the food court entrance right in this area. These are the Galleria signs. Oh, whoops. Okay, and this was the new exhibit that shows where they're being proposed. This is the larger of the 5 signs proposed at the entrance to the Gallery on Central, and the 4 smaller signs. The bridge sign is right here. The parking garage is right here, and the food court entrance sign is here. Okay, the Americana at Brand proposed signs. The sign proposed here is the one that faces the driveway in Brand Boulevard. There's 1 sign proposed here. 1 sign proposed here on Central Avenue near the intersection of Colorado Street. There are 3 signs proposed along Colorado Street. And then 1 sign proposed on Orange, right near the intersection of Colorado. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, this is the sign. This is the sign proposed on Brand, the sign proposed on Central, and Colorado Street is to the right of that where the sort of projecting sign is. These are the 3 signs proposed on Colorado Street, and this is the sign proposed on Orange. Okay. The signs were also described in the staff report on pages 3 and 4. Framing material and lighting fixtures were described in the staff report, and as provided in the ordinance, will be submitted for review and approval by the Director of Community Planning. In general, staff believes that the proposed framing material is complementary to the architectural styles of the buildings on which they're proposed. However, the design of the proposed fixtures appears to be industrial in nature and not really complementary to either the Glendale Galleria or the Americana Brand. Let me just show you, and I can pass around. You may recall that there are architectural elements currently on the Americana Brand that will serve as the framing for the proposed signs. The Galleria at this point does not have those. This is an example of what preliminarily staff and the Galleria have talked about it, and we're suggesting something like this. This is a sample of the framing that has received staff support so far, although the Director of Community Planning has the final say. So I can pass it around if you'd like. and those will be installed as part of the project with approval of the Director of Community Planning. The final component of the project, going back to the text amendment, is to the sign chapter of the zoning ordinance. Two of the three amendments to chapter, I believe, 30.33, which are the sign regulations, are necessary in order to make the sign regulations consistent with the proposed text amendment and map amendments. Both of those are described in the staff report. The third amendment adds a provision to permit the interchange of commercial copy with non-commercial copy, which is added to be consistent with case law regarding sign ordinances. The project was evaluated pursuant to CEQA, and a mitigated negative declaration has been prepared for the project. There were 2 mitigation measures added to reduce the impacts of the project to less than significant levels. The mitigation measures are discussed in the staff report. Staff received 1 comment regarding the mitigated negative declaration, and this comment and our response to this comment were contained in Exhibit 7 in your packets. As previously mentioned, on March 3rd of this year, the Planning Commission held a public hearing regarding the proposed zone change. The Commission in general is not opposed to the request, noting the importance of promoting and revitalizing commercial areas. But they also expressed that the proposal is a significant shift in city policy regarding billboards and may be considered by some as blight. A summary of the Commission comments was contained in the staff report on page 13 and 14. Ray Patel, the property owner of the Golden Key Hotel, spoke during the Planning Commission public hearing and requested requested the inclusion of the Golden Key property as into the proposed ASOZ. Some of the Planning Commission members saw merit in incorporating this property into the overlay zone. At that meeting, staff explained that the hotel would not meet the criteria proposed for an ASOZ, and staff maintains that the use and the type of development and character of this property do not sufficiently contribute to its eligibility to be included in the proposed ASOZ. Staff recommends that the council certify the mitigated negative declaration for the project and introduce the ordinances establishing sign overlay zone regulations and placing an ASOZ to the town center and Galleria districts of the DSP. Staff also recommends inclusion of some form of revenue sharing agreement to obtain public benefit as a result of approval of the ASOZ. That concludes my presentation, and with the Director of Community Planning's suggested changes to the ordinance, I'll conclude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I'll add the suggestion of the changes. With regard to the revenue sharing, we already have been in contact with the 2 applicants. They're aware that the revenue sharing as a public benefit is one of staff's recommendations, and there are mechanisms proposed in the staff report to address that. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer that. With regard to the Director of Community Planning, that's me, having the authority to sign off on the final placement and materials, I would like to propose a couple of amendments to the proposed ordinances that would give me a little bit more comfort level. On the first ordinance, page 6, section 30.26.060, subsection L, addresses the redesign of the elevator tower on the Americana and giving the director the authority to work with the applicant, and the applicant has expressed expressed a willingness and an interest to redesign the elevator tower to incorporate the sign such that it will contribute to the pedestrian scale and character of that area. And so I would like to add a sentence at the end of that section that says the director is authorized to bring such a proposal for consideration by council agency if the director deems such a review necessary. In other words, while I have the authority to work out a solution with the applicant, if it becomes necessary for us to bring it before you, I'd like to have the authority to do that. However, we may or may not take advantage of that. Also, on the second ordinance, under Section 3, there's the last sentence says the community planning director may refer the framing material and lighting fixtures to the council for its review and approval. I would like to amend that sentence to say the community planning director may refer the framing material, design compatibility, and lighting fixtures to the council for its review and approval in case there is a point where we are at a point where we don't agree necessarily on the design compatibility of the inclusion of the signage in the elevator tower. These are the only amendments that I would like to propose, and Mr. Garcia has something else to add.
Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we do have one additional change to the ordinance adopting the text amendment, and that's to Section 3026.120. It provides that a penalty for the commission of an act that's unlawful under the ordinance is a misdemeanor, and that it's punishable by fine not exceeding $2,000. That should be $1,000. That's the limit under our charter, and so our code has to be consistent with that. So we would ask that that be amended as well. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions or comments for the staff? Ms. Friedman.
I have a couple questions. Can they remove or severely trim landscaping if they're in front of the signs?
No, we are actually proposing a condition, a standard that they cannot do that. And the Planning Commission, one commission member actually amended that particular standard by saying that that streets are both on the public right-of-way and the private property, that the trees will be consistent and the landscaping will be consistent with other requirements. In other words, they will not be allowed to trim trees in order to expose the signs.
Regulation F, signs shall not cover windows, doors, or other openings or architectural elements or details of the buildings. But can they remove those windows, doors, or architectural details and then say that they're not covering any of them?
No, because the final design of the project was approved by the council agency with those specific components. That has been a part of our discussion with Caruso Affiliates and the representatives of Mayor Conrad Brand, that we've said the elevator tower incorporated those design elements, and any change to those design elements would be a shift in the final design, and that's why they're proposing to actually redesign the tower.
Okay, so just to be clear, if
right.
one of the applicants wanted to do that, they would have to go through planning and get permission and go through that whole sort of design process to do that. Okay.
And amend their original approval.
Okay. Now, the signs, in terms of the content that's going to be allowed, they're only going to really be able to be advertising products that are sold within the two structures, right, within the Galleria and the Americana.
That's accurate.
Okay, because these are accessory signs.
Correct.
Now, is it going to say on the signs available at Galleria or available at Americana, or is that not part of what we're going to be able to cover?
That's an idea that's up to the applicants to do if they wish. We have not made that a requirement that should necessarily be notified on the signage, but that's definitely an option that the applicants could.
Okay, but they're not allowed to just advertise any random product. It has to be something that's available within the walls of those two projects.
Correct.
Okay. And then if we have, I don't know who this is a question for, I think more for Mr. Garcia, if there's a particular sign that's in this proposal, let's say, that I wasn't happy with, is it possible to remove that and still approve the rest of the zoning change?
Councilmember Freeman, yes. Essentially, each of the signs are attached as an exhibit to the ordinance, so those signs that the council does not feel comfortable with, whoever makes the motion should make a motion to exclude those particular signs.
Okay, and then my last question is for Mr. Hagani. a few of the commissioners on the Planning Commission, not all of them, but I think one or two in the minority, thought that some of the signs were too clustered in a few areas. I think it was orange and color.
Right, the orange and color.
Do you have a feeling about that? Do you agree, not agree? Are you neutral?
I believe that especially the commissioner who emphasized that issue did not necessarily say that they are. However, she was concerned. That was Commissioner Landrigan, that they may be clustered in a way that may not work very well together in that context. I believe we can work with the applicant to make sure that concern is addressed, and it is true that if we are not cautious about it, that could become an issue. However, we're confident that we can address that. At this
Okay,
point.
so you're not as concerned about that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Wait,
Mr. Hagani, in terms of the actual content, they sell Coke at the Coca-Cola, at the Galleria, and at the Americana both. So obviously, you could advertise Coca-Cola on any of these signs, for instance.
That would be correct.
Right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. I don't have any other comments or questions for the staff, so we will open the public hearing. I'll start with Ryan Hirsch. Then there's a Dale Trotman, I believe,
he's our consultant,
who said he would be available to answer questions. So I'll start with Ryan Hirsch and then move to Ray Patel.
Yeah. Well, it's been quite a journey. I started this project, I think, when I first got to the Galleria about a year and a half ago. But I want to thank everybody from staff, redevelopment, planning, and council that's gotten us this far, and hopefully we can get the approvals on this. I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet, but this is a great opportunity to really partner with not only a developer who 5 years ago, I don't know if a GGP call would have gone to the corporate offices at the Grove, but now we've really made some strides and have come together also with the city and the community. And this is, again, a great opportunity that we can help support our retailers in one of the most trying economic climates that we've ever seen. So I hope that we can get this done today. Of course, I'll be available for any questions. So,
thank you, Mr. Mr. Draymond.
Yes, I just have a quick question for Mr. Hirsch. Did you and Mr. Lemo intend to wear identical neckties and blazers today?
it was Rick's idea. I just went along with it. My pleasure.
Ray Patel, followed by Al Hoffman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Ray Patel. I'm the owner of the Golden Key Hotel at 123 West Colorado Street. We're adjacent to Orange Street right here, where you see this big billboard sign. If you're going to approve this overlay, the Golden Key would like to be part of this overlay. We're going to be surrounded by these billboard-sized signs, and kind of already the hotel's kind of tucked away around four walls of the Americana. This would be a great opportunity for the hotel to participate in this marketing program to advertise our own guest rooms and our conference room and our courtyard and promote the property. And just to remind this council that for every room we rent at the Golden Key, the city gets 10% transient occupancy tax. I did go to the Planning Commission meeting last week, and like Mr. Hagani had brought up and Mr. Kiesel, that three of the planning commissioners showed concern that the hotel was being carved out of this overlay. And of the 5 criteria that were laid out to qualify to apply for this overlay, only one provision keeps it from applying, and that is the fact that we're not 400,000 square feet. And we find this provision to be clearly discriminatory towards smaller property owners. Just because of the fact that our square footage is about 30,000 feet, we are in the area of the Americana District and adjacent to the Glendale Galleria. And staff did mention from the planning, Mr. Hagani from Planning Development, that if we were to redevelop the area, that the, and I'll quote, if the hotel property is redeveloped to meet the criteria proposed for the ASOZ in the future, the City Council agency would be able to consider its inclusion in the district at that time. Respectively observed, this is untrue because of the simple fact that the square footage of the hotel is only 30,000 square feet. And if some of you recall, back in 2006, the DSP, which was approved, restricts the hotel height to only 4 stories compared to the Americana, which is 6-story. Nonetheless, if you do the math, we can never achieve 400,000 square feet, and therefore we find this to be very discriminatory. I would like this agency to, if they approve this overlay, to include the Golden Key Hotel. Thank you.
Mr. Patel, hold on.
I have a question. I'm just a little confused. Where on your building would you be able to hang one of these signs where you wouldn't be covering a detail or a window?
Okay, our frontage is on Colorado Boulevard and also on Orange Street and the alleyway. We would propose, if we were to apply for this, would be on Colorado Boulevard and on Orange Street. And compared to the Americana signage size and the Glendale Galleria, we don't have the wall square footage to put up these types of billboard-sized signs, so they'll be considerably smaller, but it would be facing Colorado Boulevard. And we do have a wall that's narrow in size but 3 stories high that we would put something there to promote our product.
So you would put a Golden Key sign, in other words?
We already have the Golden Key sign. It's right on the corner of Orange Street and Colorado, and we have one on the building, on the east and west side of the building. Those signs are not visible anymore to the public since the buildings next to us are higher than us. So what we're looking at is on Colorado Boulevard, where we have a 2-story building, that we would place some of the signage there to promote our product.
Because you don't think people know that you're a motel. I'm just trying to understand what you'd be.
Just the same argument. People know that the Americana is a mall and the Galleria is a mall, but they're given the opportunity to amplify their product line. And we would like that opportunity to amplify our product line and to show our courtyard, show our conference facility and some of our rooms on that product line, and to promote the product.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Al Hoffman, followed by Judy Kendall.
Good afternoon, council and agency members. Al Hoffman, resident of Glendale. Well, I made my annual trek to the Galleria to hit up Ryan for supporting the mayor's prayer breakfast, and he said, well, gee, now you can come down and support us in our effort to get signs up for the Galleria. It's very interesting. As you all know, I was opposed to the town center thing, and mainly, I came in support of Bill Holderness, who actually took a great financial loss in this thing, and that was unfortunate. But now that the acrimony between the Galleria and the Americana is over, and they are now working together, I think this is great, and I think it's important that they be able to advertise their retail stores that are within their complexes, especially the Galleria. They were condemned during all the hoorah that, gee, it's a brick building, looks like a penitentiary, and it's curious that we approved that. Whenever we approved it, the agency then approved it. But the Galleria is a very important and vital part of Glendale, and I believe all the stores that are within it really have no visibility to the outside, and I think it's very important that they get this visibility. And it's not like putting up billboards and things like that, which I appreciate we've done to take billboards down that are ugly all over town, especially on San Fernando. And that is, there are people saying, oh, God, here we're going to go with billboards, but we're really not. And every store and brand, they have a sign, they advertise their name. And the people in these malls don't have that opportunity. So I think that is important that they can do that at this point. I guess I would like to see, I'm not sure if you can put anything up in this thing to try to promote something for the marketplace and exchange on brand. I don't know how that would work out. And there would be a good place for a Bob's, Councilman Weaver, in the marketplace somewhere on the exchange. That'd be a great idea. I just went to a new Bob's in Pasadena on Cordova Street, just on Del Mar, just east of Lake Street. And I said, yeah, they put it in Bob's. I said, why don't we get one in Glendale? So maybe that's the thing we ought to look into. Bob's would be a great addition to that. When I was on the Downtown Specific Plan Advisory Committee, Joanne Brosey, the predecessor for Ryan Hirsch, she was on that advisory group. And we talked about the Galleria building and all that, and I had discovered a artist by the name of Eric Grohe. I don't know if any of you heard of him. He puts up murals on all these things, and there's one of his, looks like the Galleria brick wall, and he can put up beautiful things like Glendale scenes and things like that, and that would be something to look into in the future to really make the brick wall look a little more pleasant to the Americana residences.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Judy Kendall, followed by Rick Lemo.
Mayor Quintero, members of the council and the agency, Judy Kendall with the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today representing the Chamber's Board of Directors. In October of last year, the Board of Directors of the Chamber took a position to support the joint request of the Glendale Galleria and the Americana brand for the establishment of an advertising signage overlay zone to allow more and larger wall signs than permitted under the existing regulations. We believe allowing this signage at Americana and the Galleria will contribute to the economic vitality of both entities and will extend to the downtown merchants area as well. In fact, we believe that the effort shows a great partnership between the Galleria and the Americana, one that we wouldn't have seen a few years ago, and it will help strengthen business in the entire downtown area. The Chamber strongly supports this proposed advertising signage and overlay zone and encourages you to approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Lemo, followed by Leila Ramirez.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor, staff. Before I get started on my comments, I wanted to just clarify a couple of things that were in the staff exchange earlier. The redesign of the elevator tower would work strictly through the planning director. It would not go through any additional process, and it would be through his approval. And in regards to your question on the identity of the center, that had been discussed, but when we decided to go with a zone, we wouldn't be putting available at the Americana at brand at the Galleria and vice versa. So I just wanted to clarify those two things. I first and foremost want to thank staff, because what you probably don't realize is you do these things all the time, so you understand the process really well. And staff does these types of things, and they understand the process. But Ryan and I have been asking them hundreds of questions over the last few weeks, and they've been very patient and taken the time to not only explain it to us, to make sure we understand it. And so I can't thank staff for their work enough. With that, I wanted to go through a couple of questions that came up way back in November and during my discussions with council members in particular and citizens. First and most important, doesn't everybody know what products exist inside the Americana brand and the Glendale Galleria? And quite frankly, we would love it if they did. We could eliminate our probably near $5 million ad budget put together. We could probably cut back a lot of those dollars if they knew. They didn't. We should also understand that we cannot survive with just our Glendale clientele. And so when folks drive through Glendale, it's important that they know what these two entities have inside. Regional tourists are very important for our local economy, and this on-building signage actually informs and hopefully encourages guests passing through Glendale to spend their dollars right here in Glendale. The question came up about what about other businesses that might request the same on-building signage opportunities? Well, the fact of the matter is there may actually be other businesses that come and want to inquire. A perfect example may be a business that is too small, doesn't fit within the zone. The fact of the matter is the zone is very definite as to what you need to take place, certain setbacks and all that have to occur. And so it's very clear for a business to understand right up front how they can use an advertising overlay zone, and even if that's possible. One of the council members said, isn't it all about money? The City of Glendale is a partner in the success of both the Glendale Galleria and the Americana brand. any success, financial or otherwise, is a success for Glendale, making Glendale a good place to enjoy time with your family. Do I get a little extra time as the applicant?
Let's get breeze through it, Mr. Lemo.
Okay, I should have had Mr. Hoffman write my speech. The question came up regarding revenue sharing. As you are well aware, there is a revenue share agreement in place with the Glendale Redevelopment Agency and the Americana brand. In fact, this revenue share agreement already includes advertising revenue. And so we have that in place because that's part of the revenue that would come as part of our split, and that's very important. Last but not least, and very important, is the question of a sunset clause was raised. In fact, the council member who raised the question on the sunset clause doesn't really see a necessity for it at this point in time. The real problem we have with the sunset clause is it will take 5 years just to amortize the return on the original investment to get these buildings ready. And so it makes it very difficult for someone to be interested in marketing these signs for us and with us. This is a special district and should enjoy the well-researched provisions that fit within this district. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We have a wonderful relationship working forward with the Glendale Galleria. I think this sets a tremendous example for other businesses and neighbors and residents in the community that we can get beyond and work better. And last but not least, everything we do, as all of the council members know, is promises made, promises kept. We had talked, even in theory, about a trolley that would go up Brand Boulevard. Well, it takes a lot of years to put down rail, but I will tell you that on April 6th, we will be introducing an absolutely free trolley on Brand Boulevard going from Nestle down Brand with 6 stops. Absolutely free, so when you get on, you don't have to come to the Americana at Brand. But it runs Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. till 2:30 every day from Nestle to the Americana Brand, with 6 stops on Brand Boulevard, so that even the downtown Glendale merchants are going to be able to profit with that. And with that, I thank you for your time and remain open for questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Leila Ramirez.
Good afternoon, Mayor Quintero, members of the agency this time, both, and the council. Alilo Ramirez, resident. That was one big, gigantic staff report. Didn't have a chance to really go over all of it, but I'm glad to see that it was presented to you thoroughly. Generally, those reports, it's assumed that you guys read them and the rest of us don't know what's in them. I am also very pleased to see the Americana and the Galleria partnering. This is something that should have been done from the get-go, and we would be well on our way. I recognize, though, there is a significant shift for city policy with this ordinance. And it's apparent to me because this was something that a number of us recognized when this whole proposal with the town center came about. It's not that we were, or I wasn't opposed to the town center. I had a concern with the development agreement. And we came before you a number of times asking you, would you put this on the ballot for us? And the council didn't do it. So we did it ourselves. And in the process, we were accused of misrepresenting the idea that billboards were proposed. And I think that went to court. I think Ms. Jillian represented the city there, or Ms. Tweet. I think, and I may be wrong, but you can clarify for me, that it was agreed that no billboards were proposed at the Americana, and that the people signing on to this ballot initiative, which I was one of them, were misrepresenting. So, okay, we misrepresented, and here we are, proposing billboards. And the billboards is fine, you know, if that's what you want, that's what the city wants, this is what you approve. I have no problem with it, except that our policy does have a reason for it. I think we consider the billboards blight. And I haven't changed my position on that. To me, they are still blight. But, you know, times change, businesses change. And we have a new need here, and it's up to you to decide what that need is. All your proposals about sunset and size and placement and locations, all of that stuff has to be adhered to. And I propose that you do keep an eye on it. And I do oppose the, what was it, ASOZ? Planning Commission called them billboards. That's what I still think they are. But it's up to you to make that decision, and I hope that you're always acting in the best interest of the city. Thank you much, and I applaud the Galleria and the Americana for working together on this. Hope it works for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Okay, that is the last speaker card. Are there questions, comments, etc.? Or maybe before we get to the sitting members, I have a note from Mr. Starber that he'd like to read a statement from ARA.
Well, Mr. Mayor, when you're ready for council member comments, I do have a statement from Mr. Najarian I'd like to read.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Starber.
This is from ARA Najarian. I regret being absent from today's joint meeting of the City Council and the Redevelopment Agency, but as I mentioned last week, I am currently in Washington, D.C., working on advancing business and transportation issues important to Glendale, Los Angeles County, and the region. Regarding the proposed advertising signage overlay zone for the Americana at Brand and the Glendale Galleria, I am generally comfortable with the concept. I am also less concerned with the need for a sunset clause for the mandatory expiration of the ordinance as I previously expressed. My concerns at the time that I originally raised the issue last month were over the health and safety issues, traffic, distraction, etc. I have come to feel the careful oversight and attention that will be given to the signage by Caruso Affiliated and the Glendale Galleria will maintain the signage in a way that does not cause traffic or distraction issues. Although I am still open to hearing other views on the matter, I am generally supportive of the concept without a sunset clause. Furthermore, not to be overlooked is the sense of cooperation that our two retail powerhouses have exhibited recently, an unexpected yet welcome uniting of former bitter rivals. Their common goal in supporting the overlay zone has brought this about. I will view the videotaping of Tuesday afternoon's public hearing when I return to Glendale, and look forward to discussing and considering the matter at the meeting of March 23rd. ARA Najarian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Starber. Okay, are there comments or questions? I'll start with Mr. Weaver.
Oh, gee, I luck out again. I like to start here, and then everybody else jumps on what I say. I'm used to the pattern.
If you like, Mr. Weaver, I'll let you go last.
I'll start.
Let's start
No,
with
you
Mr.
asked me first. I'll go and get it done with. You know what I said before, and I spent a lot of time driving around the Galleria and visiting the Americana as I do weekly, 2 or 3 times a week, and looked at the surrounding area and thought long and hard on what I believed to be right for Glendale. So I wrote some statements down so I say it kind of like how I mean it. I know that we're extremely lucky to have the Galleria in Glendale. Between that and the auto dealers, there are 2 biggest sources of sales tax revenue to the city. And so we're very fortunate to have the Galleria. We're also very fortunate to have the Americana, what has meant to Glendale so far. Mr. Caruso knows that I always supported his efforts on behalf of Glendale. But he also knows that I vote my conscience in what I believe is best for Glendale. I believe that this request by the 2 companies is basically just one thing: revenue producers. I hear all this talk about people driving by who want to come in more. The Galleria and the Americana are destination points. People come to those places not to find the product, but because they're there. Word of the Americana, it's unique in the United States of America, and the word is spreading, and more people are going to come, and when the economy turns, we won't have probably enough parking for them. And someday the Galleria is going to be revitalized and open up because, gosh, it's 35, 40 years old, and it'll need some brush up eventually. So we got a gold mine in those 2 groups. During the development of the Americana, and I was sitting here from the time the previous owner, before General Growth, was going to build the town center. And when Russo developed his plan, I swore we heard there'd be no billboards. But I've been told of late that I did not listen well, that I probably said no billboards at this time. I'm not going to debate it. Okay, I didn't listen. Someday, billboards of wall signs, because I think there's a difference, will be coming. And today, I cannot support all the requests made for the Americana or the Galleria. That's today. Maybe I'll be convinced within the next week to change my position on a couple. I will support 7 of the Galleria signs and oppose 2. 4 of the Americana signs and oppose 1. I just don't like visually what I'm seeing of the Galleria signs over Central. I can accept all the others. I've driven around and looked, and I think they fit. But putting it on the side of the bridges, I'd rather see a mural of Glendale or something painted on that bridge than some big sign that literally fills the whole bridge. And in the Americana, the elevator tower. Away. If you're going to change it, you're going to change the aesthetics of the structure. Again, stood down there about 15 minutes on Saturday, looking at it, trying to figure how you can put a sign there that fits in with the architecture of the tower. I don't see how it can be done without major renovation, and Crusoe's not going to do that. One other reason, and I remember, I don't know when, during all the hearings on the Americana, the question was asked of Caruso or staff, why did you make the 2 towers out of glass? And the response from Caruso was, women do not like to ride in an elevator that doesn't have windows. So we put glass windows for safety. Safety of women. And I asked staff, they remembered. Now it's proposed cover it up. When I park at this end and go up and down the elevator at the closer end where the tower's going to be, I get in. If I'm on the 4th floor, second I get in and go down 1, it's all dark. It's all covered up with the large sign there. So I'm taking Russo and the Americana at the word. We put them there for safety because of women. So I don't see how I'm going to be swayed to change that position. I will support an agreement between the city and the Galleria and the Americana to provide for public benefits through the appropriate agreements, and that'll be up to staff to do. Sign we were shown, the aluminum framing for the Galleria, I think it ought to be brushed aluminum so it doesn't reflect as much light back onto the street during the day. And I'm sorry, I just cannot visualize, and I stood and looked at this too, I cannot visualize the Golden Key having signs on there. The Golden Key signs they have there now is a pretty good size, and I think pretty well shows that what is there. So I can't see adding that one in. And on those agreements, I understand there's going to have to be at least 2 agreements, because we already have a very detailed agreement with the Americana on payback and revenue sharing, etc. The Galleria has none, and a new one will have to be constructed for any benefit from their standpoint. So I think that's about it. I got a week to sleep on to see if I'll change my mind again, and I hope I don't get lobbied too much. I can figure this out for myself, I think. So thank you.
Mr. Weaver, let me ask you a question. What did you mean by public benefit?
Well, it's an economic project. They're not doing it for any other reason, no matter what they say.
Okay, I wasn't sure whether you meant public advertising.
No, so since money is going to be made, how and if does the city
participate?
Get anything back from this? And it's have to be through agreements drawn up by the city and approved by the city.
Hi, Mr. Draymond, you're going second again.
All right. Well, you know, like Avis, when you're second, you try harder. Telling you, Mr. Weaver, you're going to get banished from that slide you were talking about at the previous hearing at the Americana, I think. I hope not. I have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank the Chamber for being here and for letting us know what the pulse is from our business community outside of these two retailers, because we don't always hear from the Chamber, and it's a good way to take a pulse with regard to the business community. So thank you, Mr. Lemo. If you have a moment, putting our women in jeopardy, sir. It so happens that I recall Mr. Weaver is correct on that, and so you're putting our women in dark elevators. What are you doing, sir?
I'm going to hear about this back at the office over and over.
Hearing about it now.
But I will tell you, I will tell you that until we reach an agreement on the design with Mr. Hagani, part of the window may be covered, all of that window may be covered, but what's important to keep in mind is not all sides of the elevator are completely covered. And remember, more importantly than anything else, even because of nighttime being what it is, we don't rest solely on one element like the windows. We've got over 300 cameras, including cameras in the elevators, and the approach to the elevator to make certain that there's no guest that is at risk. In fact, I would venture a guess at saying that the safety elements we have there actually helped when the gentleman slipped through Burbank's hands and helped our police force and our security force get together and capture the criminal here, or the alleged criminal at the Americana brand. So from a safety standpoint, we would never under any circumstances do anything to jeopardize our guest safety. I think sometimes when you've got a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan, that if you eliminate an element, it may be perceived that way, but there is no compromise on the safety within the elevator of any kind. With the security force that we have, the diligence we have with the cameras, I think that all of our guests, but especially our female guests, should feel very confident and very safe.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Question for Mr. Hirsch, or someone from Glendale Galleria. If you can, what do you think from the Galleria standpoint, the annual proposed revenue for the advertising and what would be the new ASOZ would be, roughly?
Very tough question.
I know it is. Okay.
Well,
I'm hearing...
I don't know. And John, the reason being is the landscape is so different. It changes with our advertising. You know, we've talked to different vendors, and honestly, we were going back 2-3 years ago. What the initial proposal was to what it is now has been cut by probably 66%.
Let me put it a different way so that you understand why I'm asking. I would have been shocked if you had an answer for me right there, but I just thought I'd give it. Yeah,
I appreciate
that. The thing of it is this: one of the aspects we're talking about. Mr. Weaver mentions public benefit, and Mr. Lemo refers to a council member. Can't think of who he might be talking about that said, "Isn't it all about the money?" Actually, what I said was, really, this is all about revenue.
Correct.
It wasn't a question, is it all about money? No, it's a statement, I think. It's my opinion, and I agree with Mr. Weaver on this. It is about the revenue, but that, to me, doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. But I want to make it clear that I understand it is what it is. But here's the thing. I want to make sure that we understand that if we're talking about public benefit or revenue sharing, that we're talking what kind of dollars we're talking about, because we're being asked to make a major, Mr. Mayor has pointed out, others have pointed out, we're talking about a major shift of concept here. What is the public benefit going to be? So if it relates to revenue per se, what are we talking about? Without asking you what what you think the annual revenue may be to Galleria, if it worked out that $50,000 a year ended up going to the city for a certain project or projects, that would bring a balance to what some would call a sort of a tipping of the scale by changing our signage issues that sort of dim the public aesthetic a little bit, and $50,000 a year from the Galleria portion went to helping to nudge the scale back up the other way, and say that those funds went into our public art fund, so that our Arts and Culture Commission could make use of those funds for improvement of the public aesthetic throughout the city. Would that be something that would be catastrophic financially?
Let me say this. Let me start out by saying that you're going to see more of a benefit in the sales tax revenue generated from this than the money that we're ever going to see from this, or if we went into some kind of a joint partnership with the city. You're going to see more in the sales tax revenue generated. As far as a dollar figure to be able to put on this, I don't think you're extremely far off, and $50,000, maybe $100,000 a year. I just don't know because of the landscape. But again, I mean, the sales tax revenue, that's where we're going to see the benefit off of this.
All right, thank you. Is anyone that's also batting on the same team there, Team Galleria, interested in a more detailed answer than that? No one's jumping up and down. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, here's the rest of, and thank you for the responses. Here are my comments, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I do have one more question for legal here. Do we have the ability, as a council and agency, down the line, if we discover that there is a public safety element, in other words, some distracting element to this, to terminate an overlay zone?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the agency, Member Draymond, we have a provision in the code right now that's proposed for penalties. That's one component of it. If there isn't strict compliance with the provisions of the overlay zone and the criteria for maintaining the signs, so on and so forth. So we, as an initial answer to your question, they are essentially compelled through potential legal prosecution to ensure that they maintain. If the signs, for one reason or another, as you described, end up being a public nuisance, it's certainly possible, if that evidence is sufficient, for the city to file a public nuisance for an abatement action, civil abatement action for the public nuisance. So yes, that would be two ways that we could do it in terms of controlling untoward effects of signs or unanticipated negative effects aesthetically or from a traffic standpoint. Terminating the overlay zone is another question, and that without a sunset clause, obviously that would be an automatic termination. There would be no expectation on behalf of those that are enjoying that entitlement to a continued enjoyment of that entitlement or a vested right to that entitlement beyond the sunset. You would need to probably be looking at what exposure you would have for purposes of terminating an entitlement that's been invested in changing the zoning. So you'd have to go back, look at justifications for changing the overlay zone, modifying it to eliminate those. So it would be a modification to the overlay zone at some future point. That's another option that you have in order to eliminate those negative effects. So there are several ways to control negative effects that might come from it would be through the criminal prosecution, it could be through nuisance abatement activities, and it could be through future modification of the overlay zone, pretty similar to the process that we're going through right now.
All right.
Mr. Draymond, I think he also had an answer to your question.
Mr. Hagani, you have a law degree now.
No, but I have a planning degree, and so I'm not going to answer regarding the tools that are available legally. But there is a planning tool that's available to address that. And I just had a short conversation before the start of the meeting with Mr. Hirsch, because the Planning Commission members raised a concern over the bridge and the sign over the bridge. And what if we find out within a few months that there are safety issues associated with that particular sign? Mr. Hirsch offered that if that was the council's desire, they would be willing to sit down with staff and review any particular potential impacts from that sign and have a way of addressing that once every so often, once every 6 months or once a year. If that is something that we could incorporate in the language of the ordinance, if that was the council's desire, with regard to that particular element or any other part of the signage, if you have a safety concern.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagani.
And may also be able to incorporate that into any development agreement that would come along as a result of their utilizing the benefit.
All right, thank you. Those are the last of my questions, so I only have a couple of comments. One is I'm going to support this and this overlay zone. Oddly, I've heard relatively few comments and in opposition, and I assume my colleagues have the same kind of situation. We hear everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It comes up, in terms of comments and opinions on every topic, and I just haven't heard much in the way of opposition. And part of it, I think, is common sense. People who are driving in and around these two large retail centers pretty well know they're in a retail zone. They get that. When you're driving down a canyon like Central Avenue between Americana and Galleria, you certainly know you're in a retail zone, and I don't think anybody is going to go, oh, my God, signage. I just don't see anybody reacting that way. So I am not so concerned about it. The idea that this is going to cause a proliferation of large-scale signage all over the city just doesn't understand what it is we're doing here. That's why we're creating an overlay zone with very specific criteria. So that is my answer to that. I'm not troubled by it. I do not see the need for a sunset clause in this case because I'm convinced by what I've heard from the city attorney and from our director of community planning that the modifications we may need, the things that we are not anticipating right now that may arise, that we do have the mechanisms already in place or will have, perhaps if this goes forward, to make those modifications. I think it is also, just from a very practical standpoint, a little difficult to say, okay, do your long-range advertising, your planning, your booking, etc., but Mr. Advertiser that's putting out the money to do this, we may pull the rug out from under you, and the project just go away. That's practically kind of difficult. It's almost impossible, I think. So, but I think we have enough. I think we have enough mechanisms in place, or will have with this, to be able to adjust and deal with any aspects that come up in the way of advertising being distracting or public safety issues and so on. In terms of the public benefit, I would ask that when this goes to staff or to staff level, my recommendation would be that at some percentage, whatever that is, that there be some percentage of public benefit. Where I would like to see that public benefit go is as I've described. I don't know what the appropriate percentage is. It has to pencil out, but some small amount of revenue that would go to the the coffers of Glendale, so to speak. Now, in terms of the Galleria and the Americana, we're talking about very different things. We have basically an agreement, so to speak, in place with Americana. So those funds are going to keep moving us forward toward a target with them anyway. In terms of Glendale Galleria, we do not have that kind of arrangement in place. So some small percent
I'd like to hear at some point something coming back to us related to that, about the advisability of that. I do not share my colleague's concern about the placement of these. The one piece of signage that I had an objection to has been removed from the proposal. That was the brand and Broadway. I am satisfied with the remaining locations, parking structure at the entrance to the food court, I think, and the other parking structure signage. To me, reflective material, whether it's the aluminum that's there, it needs to be brushed or painted, or some other kind of surface that is non-reflective. And personally, I'd like to see it something that is a little more dimensional than just a piece of, it looks like just a piece of extruded aluminum channel. That's what it looks like. I would like to see something a little bit more dimensional if possible. And I thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman.
Okay, I'm going to confess to living here for maybe 5 years before I knew there was an Apple store at the Galleria. There, I said it. I think that just because you know that it's a big mall, you don't necessarily know what's inside of it. And sometimes you don't even know, that there might be some particular product that you hadn't thought of, some great dress or something like that you need. So I can understand why what they're asking for the Galleria and the Americana is something that is different than what other merchants might ask for or need. Where it doesn't make sense for me for the Golden Key Motel or for the Brand Avenue of cars, because when you're driving by, I know that they're selling cars. I know what car they're selling. I know that they're selling rooms. I can't think of any other business in this city, really, a retailer, where you don't know pretty much what's inside when you drive by, except for the Galleria and the Americana. So to me, they're not billboards, except that they're large. They need to be large because they're really big buildings. You'd never see them if they weren't large. And I do think they're a different animal, and I don't think that they're going to set a precedent for the rest of the city. I think we can still continue to take billboards around the city, and we will continue to take billboards down around the city, even if these are allowed. And I agree that it's a different location, that you know that you're kind of in this very dense, high, commerce area. So I think it's a different animal. I agree with Mr. Weaver. I'm very uncomfortable with the signs on the bridge over over Central, and not just for safety reasons, although I think that's an issue. If no one has told you guys, we have a bit of a problem with traffic safety in the city, and anything that might make people lift up their eyes in front of a crosswalk, and you've got a busy crosswalk where people sometimes do jaywalk, could be an issue. But that's not even my big issue. My big issue is that I don't think it's right for someone to exit the 134 at Central and to see a giant, what really would look like a floating billboard in front of them above the public right-of-way. When you're in the middle and you look to the left or right and you see someone's building and you've got the sign on your building, that's one thing. But this is over a public street, and that puts it to me in a completely different realm. So I can support everything else in the proposal. I can't support that. I do, when it comes back, I do want to see all of the staff suggestions incorporated. I think that those are all very good, and they'd make me feel a lot more comfortable. I'm glad to see that staff really has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb. I watched the Planning Commission meeting. I know that they went through all of this very, very carefully. They made a lot of very measured and thoughtful suggestions, and I know staff has looked at those and incorporating those into this proposal, and I feel a lot better knowing that. I'm also fine with Mr. Hagani working with the Americana about the elevator. I think that between the two of you, I know you can come to some kind of a resolution that will be satisfactory. I know that our planning department is not, they're not pushovers, so I know that it'll be something that really gets to the heart of what the Planning Commission had in mind. So I'm comfortable. I feel more comfortable with this now that it's gone through Planning Commission. I've said before that I take the recommendations of our boards and commissions very seriously. I believe that that is bottom-up government, and they're supportive of this, and so I think that staff's really done a lot of work with the applicants to make this palatable to the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for myself, I generally support the proposition. There was never any question in my mind that there would be signs on Colorado and Central as the as the Americana went up. In fact, the frames are already in place. So if I had any doubts at all, the minute I saw the frames, I said eventually there'll be wall signs there. The fact that they are advertising the merchants or merchandise, although for sure we're not going to have any control, so I just happen to mention Coca-Cola. I'm sure there may be some other generic things that are sold in both locations that will go up on the walls. But generally speaking, I'm sure that the two property owners will want to focus on bringing people into their place of business. I'm very much against billboards. As a matter of fact, I was pushing to eliminate the billboards on San Fernando Road. We succeeded, and there's still other locations in Glendale where they're totally inappropriate. But in this particular case, I don't think they are. Quite frankly, I occasionally go to Foxy's little restaurant there, and looking at those bare walls, I think, in a sense, it's going to just work out a lot better to have something up there of interest. And the same with Central, which is basically a corridor that you're driving through. And I think it will increase the interest. As I mentioned in the past, the Apple store, I knew there was an Apple store there, but to tell you the truth, I didn't visit that Apple store until I saw it on the wall of the Galleria. Then somehow, psychologically, it was confirmed. There really is one at the Galleria. So I think it's a good idea. I don't think the sign over the bridge makes any sense at all. I just think it's too jarring. And I feel the same way about the elevator. I'm not particularly interested in the elevator. That entranceway is quite beautiful. It's striking. And I think it's of marginal value to the property owner. I mean, you're either walking into the Americana or you're driving into the Americana. So I'm not sure what a sign on the elevator would do for you. I do think participating in the revenue share is important to us. We can carve that money out to put it into an arts program, whether it's under the jurisdiction of Arts and Culture Commission or not, but we can take a percentage of that money, and I think we should definitely negotiate with both entities. I don't think we need to go in to look for a small percentage. I think we need to go in and negotiate whatever makes business sense for both entities and for the city. Then in terms of the frames, no, I'm not too impressed with the frames. It seems to me what would really look nice would perhaps be a frameless, if that's possible, if somehow you can wrap the ad rather than into any kind of frame. I mean, that Galleria is a sort of modern look with the smooth brick, so I'm not sure that a frame would add any aesthetic value to it. That frame for sure wouldn't, but frameless is possible, and the planning commission or the planning directors, including that noted architect, Mr. Lewis, if he agrees to it, then I'm fine. But overall, I think there's nothing wrong with doing this. It's not a slippery slope, at least not for me. This is specific to that area of the city, and that's as far as I'm willing to go, unless some other building is built that somehow needs to advertise the different businesses within the building. But I don't think that's going to happen. So overall, I do support it. Ms. Friedman, you had a comment, then Mr. Weaver.
I was just going to suggest that in terms of the elevator at the Americana, since they have to come back anyway, that maybe we could leave that open and see what they come back in terms of designs, because that may convince us all one way or the other, since it sounds like that one is pretty much an aesthetic concern.
Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, based on the comments heard, absolutely, the Americana has the best security I've ever seen. On the ground, everywhere. Up in the parking lots, they have those little spy cameras all over. That's what helped in that case. So no hit on that at all. And yeah, I guess we all saw the frames when it was built and knew what was going to happen. I'd be willing to bet if I know Caruso well enough, the conduit for the electrical is already there. You just can't see it. There'll also be a lot more work. And it's been said, and if you go around the blocks of the Americana and the Galleria, it is a unique part of Glendale, just like the high rent district, the financial at the other end. It is very unique. And one of the terms used to describe the Galleria in the past is the fortress, because of all the walls, no windows, all walls. And that's why I think those signages that they're talking about on those monolithic walls will work really well. Kind of break up the mass. I just hope someday I see Mervin's corner torn out totally and really popped. So it's a lead-in to take you through the Galleria into the Americana and back out. That'll activate North Brand a heck of a lot more. So I'm all for those others because it is unique, and you're going to put them somewhere, that's the place to put them. Thank you.
Okay, we have a series, I'll close the public hearing. We have a series of
consonant comments.
Motions and,
Mr. Mayor, on that subject, your staff would like clarification on a couple of things. Mr. Draymond had mentioned the sunset clause and that he didn't see a need for it. Mr. Najarian did in his comments, but we're not sure that...
said no.
Okay. I see a consensus then. The second was on the Central Bridge. I think two of you were no. Mr. Weaver had said, I'm inclined not to go there.
No, I said more than inclined. No.
Okay.
You want to paint a mural on there or something? Fine.
Well, you want those taken out of the ordinance.
One more additional comment is with respect to the elevator sign. The way the ordinance is currently drafted, it was giving delegating authority to Mr. Agani to approve a sign at the location, provided it met the criteria in the ordinance. It had to be compatible with the design. It couldn't cover any windows or other openings, and other standards that we're putting into the code. That's the current language that's in the ordinance approving a sign at that location. If the council wants some other direction, I heard, for example, Councilmember Friedman say you'd like the design of that to come back.
Well, no, I was offering that as an alternative for the council members who are, not as interested in the sign. Personally, I'm comfortable, especially since I feel like that sign is interior to their property. And, it's on their property. It's not right on the public right-of-way. I think they should have the latitude to work with staff on that.
Okay.
But that's just me. You'd have to take a poll, I think.
If I may make the clarification, with the added language that I proposed that we still have the authority to bring that particular element to council if necessary, but only if necessary.
Maybe
Well, the
internal, but it's about as external as you can get.
Yeah, I'm not supporting it. How about you, Mr. Weaver? So if you need 4, do you need just
Need
3?
4.
Yeah.
4.
It looks like you have 2 supporting, and, well, that you don't have
matter.
your 4 anyway.
Just for that sign.
No, you don't have the 4.
Okay. All right, well, how can
So
we
when the
work?
ordinance comes back, we need to carve those out
Well, we can't
of the second
can we
ordinance. Pardon me?
introduce the ordinance?
You can introduce them.
introduce it and then
With the
Introduce them, and when they come
modifications?
back, all those items will be deleted from the. Actually, it'll be up to the applicants. The ordinance will be adopted without those 2 signs being part of the program. It's up to them whether they want to amend their application or drop it altogether.
Good. Well, I'll be glad to introduce them.
As far as the bridge goes, what is there any?
Have the name again for the record.
Yeah,
Brian Hirsch, General Manager, Glendale Galleria.
Yes, please.
We'll reopen the public hearing. Go ahead,
Okay.
Mr.
Ryan Hirsch, General Manager, Glendale Galleria. Is there anything we can do as far as, because the bridge is our most important part of the piece of this puzzle. You guys talked about, possible revenue sharing with being able to help out the arts. We keep coming back to helping our tenants out. This is going to be the most important piece to this puzzle. Is there anything, we're open to different ideas. We know that this probably isn't the frame that's going to be used, but anything that we can do collectively to make this work?
The only thing I can think that I would personally be open to at the bridge is something that was not product specific. If it was something that was more of a wayfinding sign for the Americana/Galleria itself, that I could justify. But to have, like I said, to have someone seeing a particular product that far up and down Central, from Los Feliz Boulevard, from the 134, and seeing the Coca-Cola sign, that to me is just tacky. If it said Americana Galleria and then it became a wayfinding sign, because I have run into people who are wandering around looking for your mall who were lost, I could kind of justify that. But, and especially if something that's not changing to where you have less of that distraction because it's not changing every month. But for me personally, a product up on that location, I can't go for it.
It doesn't matter if it was subtle, more of a subtle product or anything. Also, what we could do is things we've talked about in the past, getting the community involved. We could allocate in a certain amount of time where the city could promote something. We really want to make this a collective effort between all the parties. But that is our most important piece of the puzzle.
Why didn't you put any signs on Broadway?
Any signs on Broadway, where would we have put
They can't be on that wall?
Broadway, under the downtown specific plan, is
That would not be consistent with the requirements of the
You
DSP.
got to be kidding.
That was why staff recommended removal of the Mervyn signs as well.
Well, I can understand that, but
Let me make a suggestion here, or let me ask a question. Is it possible for us to move forward today and ask that those 2 elements that did not see the light of day today be brought back separately?
Yes.
Because one of the things that was raised during the discussion was the element that, and I do support the signage on the bridge, but one of the things I heard today was from my colleague, Councilmember Friedman, and who raised a point that I had not considered, and that was about the extent of the visibility, looking, as a north-looking and south-looking sightline corridor, if you will. And there's a possibility that based on the size of the sign, limiting the size of the sign, could conceivably mitigate that concern. So I'm more inclined, rather than just say absolutely, abjectly no, let's bring it back separately along with the elevator sign. The elevator signage separately, and it'll either see the light of day or it won't.
if they come back, they better have some different renderings, different options available.
That's what I'm saying.
Don't leave it to our imagination to figure out how it's going to happen.
Exactly.
Mr. Lemo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to just comment directly on the elevator sign. I don't want to misunderstand Councilmember Weaver. I think the security that we have in place helps allay your concern about the public safety issue?
To a degree, but I stand by your statement that you all made. And if you mean you designed that tower knowing you're going to put in security cameras and still making the statement for the safety of women we're putting glass. Doesn't add up. Well, either you did not think about it when you designed it, and then last minute you decided to put in security cameras.
Well, no, we had security cameras there anywhere, and keep in mind that when we talk about elevators in the great scheme of things, the main elevator bank that most customers use is totally glass.
I'm aware.
That being the main tower. So, that could be the context of the conversation. I'm trying to think back 9 years ago, and I'm probably not doing well. That being set aside, though, I think it's important for you to know the practical side of this. We are not the people who came up with that sign location. Those that market it do. It represents 60% of the total signage revenue in the package that Van Wagner will take to the street. Quite frankly, without the elevator sign, we just can't afford to do it. It's just not financially feasible. So that's why we did agree, and I thought the safeguard was to sit down and work with staff to make certain that the pedestrian orientation of that sign and the design element is not only respected, but maybe even improved on that elevator tower. So I guess what we're basically asking for, and it seemed that we may have 3 council members today and maybe 4 in general, but I want to answer the mayor's concern and also explain to you why it's so crucial, not just important. We may have a very difficult time finding a company who's willing to market the package without a sign that the industry feels is 60% of the revenue. That's why we're willing to spend and make a significant change and redesign and improve that architectural element. The architectural element right now is a tower with 3 windows that show an elevator shaft even when the elevator's not running. I think we can improve that. So I would like you to just be aware of that fact and know that this may be one of those, the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater as far as the industry's concerned.
But the thing is, in all the negotiations, all the talking, because you've talked to all of us, whatever, not until today did you admit the 2 signs over Central and the sign on the elevator are make or breaks.
Well, I didn't know that the signs on Central were make or break.
Well, I could figure that out.
Okay, well then...
It wasn't hard to figure out. Just be upfront with us.
I've been focusing more on our sign.
Well, you never told me that if we don't have that sign, it's a make or break.
I'm sorry, I thought I did. That would have been my mistake.
Mr. Draymond.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I want to come back to my question. I'm not so anxious to sit here and debate issues from the past that I frankly wasn't here to debate. I recall what Mr. Weaver is talking about simply because you couldn't live in Glendale at the time and not be hearing all about the discussions with Americana and so on. And I know he is correct about that, but that was then and this is now, and economic realities are different then than they were now, and I know we all know that. But I'm also looking at the clock, Mr. Mayor, and in less than 15 minutes we're going to be in our evening session for quite a while, and
back again.
And so we'll be right back here. And so what I wanted to, again, request is that if we are going to make a vote on some aspect of this, that we do it and bring back those 2 elements later. The folks from the Galleria and the folks from Americana Brand can make their case about their respective elements that they say are crucial to their issue, and we'll have a full agency and a full council at that time.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add that right now we're at the introduction stage of these 2 ordinances.
Yeah, we don't have to take any votes. All we have to do is introduce the ordinance with those exceptions.
Well, we want to introduce the ordinances at B and C with modifications.
The modifications that you recommended?
Well,
and I'll close the public hearing.
All of us pulling those 2.
Yeah.
Mr. Starmer.
You can introduce the ordinance. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to vote its support when it comes back. Introduce the ordinance will allow us to bring back then the ordinance amended, plus the option to incorporate 1 sign, both signs, or some modified sign. So just introducing them as they stand doesn't limit your ability to change it later. You could adopt it as it's written, or you could make modifications to exclude signs when it comes back to you for adoption.
I appreciate the clarification because I might not be supporting that motion.
Exactly. Exactly.
And also,
right.
you do have a resolution at 2A. We can bring that back on the agenda for next week, and so we can adopt them all together if the council would like. We've done that in the past.
Okay.
We'll bring that back with the ordinance. So, Mr. Weaver did introduce the ordinance.
Both on ordinances.
Mr. Weaver.
Yes?
Have you introduced ordinances?
Yes, both of them.
Right. The ordinances have been introduced. What's next?
Is there a motion to adjourn both bodies? Is there a motion?
Hey, before I do, I've been calling Alan Loomis Mr. Lewis. I don't know about that.
He didn't care.
We have actually already updated the personnel records. He's now known as Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, from now on, that's it. I'm going to be consistent and keep calling him Mr. Lewis. I meant Loomis. Excuse me.
I move we adjourn for the city council,
We are adjourned.
and I'll move to adjourn for the redevelopment agency.
Second.
The agency is adjourned. Thank you.